Google Cloud networking outage caused by GCLB configuration bug, a DevOps Postmortem. It's 09:35 U.S. Pacific on November 16, 2021. You're sitting in your chair when the monitors start screaming, and suddenly, the internet starts to fracture. It isn't just a local hiccup, it's a massive, systemic failure of the Google external proxy load balancing service. Across the globe, thousands of websites and applications, some huge, some small, suddenly stop serving content and begin spitting out nothing but 404 errors. For anyone relying on GCLB to route their traffic, the front door just slammed shut and locked. You can almost feel the panic rising in the Slack channels as downstream services go dark simultaneously. We don't know it yet, but a latent bug in a configuration pipeline has just triggered a domino effect that will paralyze standard operations for nearly 2 hours. The scale is massive, the impact is global, and the why is buried deep inside a complex networking stack that just turned into a nightmare. Imagine you're running a massive digital storefront. You need a traffic cop to direct every single visitor to the right aisle, or else your business grinds to a halt. That is exactly what Google External Proxy Load Balancing, or GCLB, does for thousands of companies hosted on Google Cloud. It sits at the front door, handling the heavy lifting of routing requests so applications can actually function. On November 16, 2021, that traffic cop didn't just fall asleep. It started handing out 404 not found signs to everyone trying to get inside. Because GCLB is a foundational piece of infrastructure, this wasn't just a minor glitch for one small site. It was a systemic failure where the front door slammed shut on a global scale, effectively silencing websites and services that relied on Google's networking backbone to reach the world. For these companies, it wasn't just a bug, it was an immediate blackout of their digital presence. It was just another day in the cloud, and for most of the world, the infrastructure felt invisible, which is exactly how it's supposed to work. The Google External Proxy Load Balancing Service, or GCLB, was humming along, routing traffic, and keeping thousands of websites live. But beneath the surface, a latent bug was lurking in the configuration pipeline, waiting for a spark. It didn't take a massive, manual overhaul to set things off. It just required routine system operation to trip the wire. On November 16, 2021, at 09:35 U.S. Pacific, that ghost in the machine finally manifested. Suddenly, the seamless flow of data hit a brick wall. Instead of reaching their destinations, HTTP and S requests began slamming into a wall of Google 404 errors. The invisible infrastructure was suddenly screaming, and the quiet before the storm was officially over. It was the morning of November 16, 2021, and for a lot of people, the internet just started feeling broken. At exactly 09:35 U.S. Pacific, the first cracks appeared in the Google External Proxy Load Balancing Service. It wasn't a slow crawl, it was an immediate wall. Suddenly, a massive wave of HTTPS requests across the globe weren't hitting their intended destinations, they were slamming into flat-out 404 errors. For any business relying on GCLB to route traffic, the front door just slammed shut. By 09:50 U.S. Pacific, the alarm started screaming in the nerve center as automated systems and a flood of panicked customer support tickets hit the desks. Engineers didn't have time for a long meeting. They saw the spike in errors and knew something was fundamentally wrong with how configurations were propagating through the pipeline. The ghost in the machine had officially manifested, turning valid requests into dead ends. It started with a ghost in the machine, a latent bug, lurking deep within the configuration pipeline. On November 16, 2021, at 09:35 U.S. Pacific, this sleeper cell finally woke up, poisoning the rules that fed into the Google External Proxy Load Balancing Service. It wasn't just a local hiccup, it was a systemic rot. Suddenly, a massive swath of websites and applications across the globe began choking on their own traffic, spitting out 404 errors for incoming HTTPS requests. The failure didn't stay contained. It cascaded through downstream services as customers realized their infrastructure was effectively invisible. By the time engineers were alerted at 9:50 U.S. Pacific, the contagion had already spread across multiple Google Cloud products. It took a hard rollback to the last known good configuration to finally choke off the fire, but for those 93 minutes of peak chaos, the network was essentially a minefield of broken links and lost connections. So, what actually broke the gears of the machine? It wasn't a sudden spike in traffic or a rogue human clicking the wrong button. Instead, it was something far more insidious, a latent bug hiding deep within the configuration pipeline. This specific piece of infrastructure is responsible for propagating customer configuration rules to the Google external proxy load balancing service. On November 16, 2021, this hidden flaw finally tripped over routine system operations and triggered a massive failure mode. Because the pipeline couldn't process these rules correctly, it began spitting out 404 errors for any HTTP or S requests hitting the GCLB. It was a ghost in the machine, a bug that sat quietly in the code until the very moment it poisoned the entire routing logic, effectively turning valid traffic into dead ends for users across the globe. Imagine waking up to find your entire front door replaced by a brick wall. That's the vibe for anyone riding on Google Cloud's infrastructure when this hit. On November 16, 2021, at 9:35 U.S. Pacific, a bug in the configuration pipeline turned the GCLB service into a black hole. It wasn't just a few glitchy pixels. It was a massive sweep of 404 errors for websites and applications globally. The blast radius moved through multiple Google Cloud products and hit downstream services like a freight train. For those caught in the crossfire, the digital signs were going dark as HTTPS requests simply vanished into the void. While the core issue was rolled back by 10:08 U.S. Pacific, the fallout lingered. The total duration of impact stretched to 1 hour and 53 minutes, during which customer configuration pushes were frozen just to keep the remaining lights on. At 9:35 U.S. Pacific, the alarms started screaming. The GCLB service began spitting out 404 errors for HTTPS across a massive swath, the internet. By 9:50, Google engineers were slammed with both automated alerts and a flood of panicked customer support tickets. They had to move fast. The immediate play was a desperate rollback to the last known good configuration, which finally silenced the 404 errors by 10:08 U.S. Pacific. But they weren't out of the woods yet. The team had to stabilize the environment while preventing anyone from making new changes that could trip the same wire. From 10:04 until 11:28, they locked down customer-initiated configuration pushes in GCLB entirely. It was a period of high-tension gatekeeping. Finally, at 11:28, they validated the fix and reopened the gates, ending a grueling 1 hour and 53 minutes of chaos. The fix wasn't a complex rewrite of the entire networking stack, but it was a surgical strike to stop the bleeding. Once the team identified that a latent bug in the configuration pipeline was poisoning the GCLB service, they moved fast. By 10:08 U.S. Pacific, engineers successfully rolled back the system to the last known good configuration, finally silencing those 404 errors for the hammered downstream sites. But they didn't just flip a switch and call it a day. To ensure the house didn't burn down again, they froze all customer initiations in GCLB between 10:04 and 11:28 U.S. Pacific. This cooling off period allowed them to validate the fix and deploy beefier monitoring tools before reopening the gates. By the time pushes resumed at 11:28, they had moved past that 93-minute window of chaos, ensuring the pipeline was actually stable enough to handle real-world traffic again. Look, if there's one thing this mess teaches us, it's that your infrastructure is only as resilient as the weakest link in your provider's chain. When a latent bug in a configuration pipeline can trigger a massive outage for GCLB, it proves how dangerously exposed we are when relying on third-party giants. The fact that 404 errors flooded the web because of a single internal logic flaw underscores why trust isn't a substitute for robust engineering. We need to treat infrastructure as untrusted. If your service depends on their load balancer, you better have independent monitoring in place. You can't rely on a status page that might not reflect the reality of your user's experience. To survive the next hit, we need rigorous configuration management and proactive safeguards. Don't just hope the vendor stays up. Build your systems to detect the failure the second it happens, regardless of what their dashboard says. That's how Google Cloud turned a very bad day into a lesson. If this saved you an outage, subscribe for the next postmortem.